I haven't kept up with Star Wars. 0 books read, few casual wiki surfs out of boredom. I'm not even up to date on the films. I saw the original trilogy as a kid on VHS, and I was the only person to laugh loudly in the theater as Anakin's body slumped on the ground and he let loose the words. Oh, that's great. I haven't even played Star Wars since like GameCube days with one of the Lego games. I watched Chewie rip a dude's arms off. It was sick. Oh, and Soul Calibur 4. Yeah, that was a good addition. Remember that? Remember Yoda ducking throws? Remember Starkiller's lightning attack in a game with shit-ass Wi-Fi? Yeah, dude. I love Star Wars. So when people, in quotations, voted for KOTOR, which I foolishly put on a Patreon poll, I knew I was in for a ride. And ride I did, straight into the jaws of the Rancor. Let's cut the editorializing for a sec. I like Mass Effect. I like BioWare's RPGs. They were fun and cherished memories from the 360 era. So having the chance to play KOTOR presented an opportunity to look back at the design lineage of some games that, while I haven't played in nearly a decade, I really liked. The problem is, this is Star Wars, a series I mostly know now for folks going apoplectic on YouTube about. So I'm gonna apologize up front, something I hate doing. You shouldn't have to preface your work unless there's a real good reason, because I'm gonna react predictably to decades-old concepts that I simply haven't engaged with. I'm gonna step on some fan landmines, and we're just gonna have to live with that. Or go ape. Whatever. Let's play a Star Wars! Because it is a Star Wars video, I will use the Force to grab my controller. I think I'm about to hernia. What I've learned playing KOTOR is that I don't live in the real world. It's all fake, and every human I interact with is part of a psy-op meant to lie openly to me about KOTOR 1. Hey, I can't get this thing to run on my modern tech. Oh, what? It starts just fine on mine, bro. Hey, I tried patching it, and this ain't my first rodeo. I did Thief as well. Thing just won't start. It must be the version. You should try another. Hey, I'm literally playing the Nintendo Switch port of the game, and it's buggy, broken, and crashing more often than it should. Oh, sounds like a you problem, my man. Actually, just about everyone said, thankfully KOTOR 2 is so much better. Cool, but I still have to play 1, so maybe gas a guy up a little. I can deal with tech issues, and I don't think they detract from the overall experience. I don't know if that's controversial. It's kind of like Xenogears having a poor translation. I look past that stuff because I didn't play the glitches or the bad translation. I played the game, and that other junk is dressing or incidental or fleeting. It's fine. But I do owe KOTOR 1 for driving me mentally insane during play. I ain't felt this alive in years. I'm sweating. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic is a 2003 BioWare RPG, meaning that despite being the first BioWare Star Wars title, its own design lineage stretches back to Baldur's Gate and Neverwinter Nights. Ew. It was directed by Casey Hudson, who went on to become the Mass Effect guy, and arguably more badass, the Jade Empire guy. But that's a secret. BioWare was still in its pre-original flagship IP days, excluding the very basic Shattered Steel and whatever MDK2 is. But at least they were comfortable creating stories in established universes by then. Look, the creative director here, James Olin, went on to direct for Dragon Age Origins. So like, I owe that guy a beer. Or a hand job. I love the cover that captures the series' grandiose nature and mystique while undercutting expectations with that yellow lightsaber. Can you imagine if KOTOR were released today? Oh my god, they gave the woman a special lightsaber. Mary Sue woke. In any case, you make a character, pick some base stats, and pick a starting class. Pouring one out for anyone who's never played D&D and forced to wade through this. I'm so smart, dude. Holy shit. The game's functionally Dungeons & Dragons, by the way, D20s and all. Sure, not exactly, but that's what you're signing up for. A Star Wars role-playing game with party combat featuring discrete rounds in battle instead of real-time action-y battles, but that's fine. It's not like I wanted to mechanically schmoove on dudes. I don't even care. Let's hit the intro. Jesus Christ! The game starts hot with a raid on our ship. We're not told exactly who we are or what we're doing. In fact, the protag seems confused about everything. I'm sure that's nothing to worry about. It's good for a few reasons. Functions like a tutorial, yeah, great. My favorite part is showing off these two Jedi, fighting just a little bit off from us. We get a glimpse of what lightsaber combat, what Jedi combat looks like. It's something to push for. Not totally dissimilar to finding the Master Sword in a pedestal, but being unable to pull it out. And that's great for KOTOR because it spends a girthy amount of time denying the player any sort of proper lightsaber fun, forcing you through the clunky BioWare RPG CBT grinder. Hope you like looking like a doofus for 8 hours. It is, at this point of the video, I am legally obligated to mention that several containers can indeed drop lightsabers much earlier than their story appearance, but it's unlikely. Thanks for coming to my fandom clarification moment. I hope it contributed meaningfully to your complete understanding of the material. Now, I could list every planet and talk about every major plot beat, but I'm not going to do that, mostly because that video exists. Thank you for your service. Instead, let's cut through the kidneys and harvest the stones.
What?
KOTOR 1 is fundamentally a Star Wars experience trademark, kind of like going to Disneyland. You know, here's Desert Place, do the desert things, look at sand people, and you'll cut to the tree place so the game can say, look at the tree place. There are Wookiees. So much licensed material does so well with fans because it's willing to fold to their interests or to tick boxes, as it were. Actually, undercutting that is why I like KOTOR 2, but I'm getting ahead of myself. One does not play KOTOR 1 to experience a transcendental and unique RPG video game. They came for the lightsaber. Or Star Wars, whatever. Unfortunately, most of the early game is pretty stale. You're a nobody with a funny face walking around these environments, solving little problems for people via side quests, finding potential party members and helping them out individually, talking to shopkeeps, citizens, and drunks, occasionally getting in fights. Never really sure how events need to pan out to advance the game. I don't want to understate that. You land in the first world totally unsure how you're getting off planet, and after traipsing through cantinas, workshops, the sewers, a Sith base, getting in swoop races, rescuing Bastila.
As far as rescues go, this is a pretty poor example.
What the fuck? We're eventually able to fly off planet by jacking a ship that brings us to Dantooine, the Jedi Academy planet.
I see. Now that I'm back in charge of this mission, perhaps we can start doing things properly.
Oh my god, shut up! I think that sort of loosely threaded chain storytelling is actually really good for an action movie, and for Star Wars writ large as well. But in a Western RPG, and a fairly slow one, it's really easy to feel like you're waltzing from boring unconnected attraction to boring unconnected attraction, ticking the boxes. It's a very weird game. You never really get the intense linearity of Dragon Age, and it's definitely hard to jive with any random NPC. So it's easy to feel like you're meandering, lost, purposeless. But this is a fictional universe where the Force exists, and you're effectively dragged around by fate. So who can say if it is good or bad? Checks out narratively, and that makes it fun, innit? On the other hand, you're given remarkable freedom after a certain point, and allowed to traverse the universe on a whim, which is awesome. I love visiting Plarko Flip and Chonk Bor. Charting your own little adventure through the stars can only be a good thing. I mean, they kept that for Dragon Age and Mass Effect. That rippled. If anything, the only real weakness is the lack of ramifications your adventures tend to have off-world. Different planets offer a sort of fresh slate for the player entering in. You're not Commander Shepard, right?
I've had enough of your disingenuous assertions.
You're just some dude who blew in from out of town. Glup shitta on each new planet. It's hard to call the planets and their biomes opulent. BioWare's always struggled with presentation, at least to my eye, and made up for it with scale, interesting characters, compelling plots, something to fight for, cool abilities, cool classes, a lightsaber. You can feel the parts and pieces groaning under the hardware. Seriously, thing can't even hit a consistent 60 on Switch. Oof. Did you know FPS talk is discourse? Did you know some people think you're a snoot? If you talk about FPS in games, look man, I've been video editing for years. When you see it, you'll get it. It's a disease. It is a sickness. And because all of this is an approximation of all those places I saw as a kid on a now puny CRT, it's hard to feel anything about them. Though I get feeling differently if you played it younger, and as a fan. See, this is why I pull out the Disneyland term. I go to the big hut guy, he's a shady money grubber. Yeah, okay, chumbo, go give a kid a vor fetish. I talk to a corporate suit, She's the worst human being I've ever met. I talked to this Sith dude. He is a top donator to the Libertarian Party of America. This is all to say, very little about the game undermines expectations or captures interest. You know who these people are frame one. In a second, which isn't doing much to work with the everyone's an alien living together vibe, okay? This isn't a fighting game. I was looking for at least a little depth, a little quirkiness, you feel me? Yeah, alright. If I'm being honest, KOTOR is actually pretty good at catering to multiple playstyles. You can approach dungeons in at least a few ways, each that are entirely determined by your build, what skills you bought into, what party members you bring. Now, I'm a horrible, horrible brute, so I enjoy going the direct route through most of these kinds of games, especially when I'm not overly interested. But, for example, in most dungeons, you can hack computer terminals and use tools to make turrets malfunction and affect other contextual dungeon elements. And only characters skilled in computer usage can make real use of these because it's so costly to keep up the necessary resources to consistently make use of every computer, without the resource saving affixed to the computer skill. You often have to deal with mines or locked chests, so even if a big dumb asshole with a glowing laser sword is the platonic ideal for the protagonist, you're gonna want a rogue, or someone rogue adjacent, to maximize your playthrough. Persuasion, which is affected by the charisma stat, can alter entire dialogue trees and smooth over altercations. I mean, I sunk points in the whole game and it almost never worked, but don't let that stop you. The ways that skills affect play aren't notably interesting or novel, outside of maybe the range of hacking benefits, but you are allowed to find your way through the game on your own terms and reap those associated rewards. Despite how crusty the thing looks, there's fun on offer. Also, and such as this Rancor fight where if you sneak past him with mission, you'll get detected and die. Or if you fight him head on, you die. So you have to sneak a grenade into the bodies and he blow up. I would say that is a fun and interesting encounter. So let's talk combat for a while. Players begin the game in a base class and end up in one of 3 Jedi classes, spoiler alert, which more or less function like a tank with good damage, a utility DPS, something like a rogue, but more accurately a skill monkey, a term from actual D&D, and a force wizard of sorts. Most guides recommend the tank class for newer players because it combines survivability with consistent melee damage. It carries with low investment, like a spoonful of Metamucil. And that's what I did. Ram that play out. Most of the core attributes from strength to dexterity don't affect much outside of combat, but intelligence gives you more skill points, which can wildly vary play for someone willing to not play the straightforward path. Allowing for stealth, droid repair on the fly, better use of explosives. It's surprisingly diverse, but the game barely makes an effort to hype these things up, and weights it all on the lightsaber. It's the easiest build to get working, and hey, those animations are beautiful. You see them way too much to care by the end, but the detail put into crafting compelling, fluid animations shoots above every other animation set, from blasters to fists. You can be the little brother, looking at the crappy CRT your brother's playing KOTOR on, watch the lightsaber swings from a distance and think, wow, that looks pretty cool. Now, KOTOR isn't particularly mechanical. You don't need much dexterity, like IRL, not stat-wise, shut up, to beat the game. That said, combat isn't always easy either.
What the fuck?
Once you're in combat, basic attacks are automatic. That's standard, okay, fine, and you'll queue up actions ranging from special melee swings to force powers and more. But this is quasi-D&D, remember, so many actions are tied to a behind-the-scenes roll, meaning you can blow through some encounters through sheer luck, or get exploded unfairly. Thankfully, it's an RPG, and it's more about rigging the numbers in your favor, gearing up, building your character to rein those systems in, and it's never really a problem to play. That said, KOTOR feels weird. I think newcomers might be surprised at the clunk just going off the gameplay footage. You have to imagine that every attack only occurs because a round is occurring, just like in D&D, meaning everyone does their turn and the game moves on to the next round. However, moving your character effectively stalls your own rounds and removes you from the round queue, as it were, so strafing in combat can be catastrophic for DPS. It's partly why Force Jump is an ability for Jedi. It helps keep melee characters in the fight instead of running around. This all results in a fairly stiff experience, and it's something BioWare clearly disliked, or focus testers disliked enough that Dragon Age went from this, to this, to this, to this. I don't want to hear any, oh no, but I like the clunk. You are in the minority. Glad you're built different, we're in the same boat, but we're the minority. On the Switch version, you can only queue one additional move at a time while another is round ready, as it were, so you're more or less locked in place for optimal melee combat. Body blocking is possible, and overall combat feels heavy. It's hardly as fluid as the lightsaber motions suggest. Now, ranged options exist, blasters and all that, but I figure most players pack a lightsaber and force powers. And, big surprise, most of the best ones smooth over clunk with pure range. Force lightning and force push are obscene and invalidate any need for intelligent skill usage on lower difficulties. At least they're fun and interesting, but like every combat maneuver, they get old eventually. Playing this, I'm suddenly more appreciative of Mass Effect allowing players to perform biotic combos solo or with team members, priming an explosion with one move and popping it with another, asking for slightly more interesting, dexterous play. Early RPGs. What you gonna do? If you run into anything too difficult, you can usually use the handy pause and command feature native to most BioWare games, and it tends to smooth things over. Sometimes being lazy just isn't enough. Now, traveling from flat world to flat world didn't do much to get me excited. Thankfully, it's a BioWare RPG, so plenty of fully fledged characters exist to make the journey more enjoyable. Actually, Bastila is really compelling, but let me get to the endgame section to explain that. The other party members are pretty hit or miss. We've got a droid, another droid who's significantly funnier, an extremely boring Wookiee. You know the kid in high school who could do Wookiee sounds? Why? Why'd you do that? You've got characters like Mission, this fairly naive, even cute addition to the party, horrendously undercut by this limp dick story where we need to find her brother. His ex called him a bum, Mission doesn't buy it, we all know what's coming, one planet later dude's a bum.
I don't believe this. Lena was right about you.
Yeah, consider me riveted. Canderous, the Mandalorian, fills a necessary early game role and can be straight up broken with the right build, but like most non-Jedi party members, it's hard to care. Canderous, Karth, these potentially compelling characters fall off for casual players packing a full Jedi team of the protag, Bastila or Juhani, and Jolie Binto. We found it. The funniest name. Every Jedi character has at least some edge that makes them enjoyable to interact with and both flashy and powerful in battle. And in a game as slab-like as KOTOR 1, that's everything. I'll admit, I didn't pursue conversations as often as with other BioWare games because I didn't find them overly compelling to spend time with. The entire game feels a bit like that, a little too trite. It's not that the experience was horrible, just bumpy. I mentioned the first planet being a real fly-by-the-seat-of-your-pants run, nothing really constructed or solid feeling, flitting between attractions. Dantooine, the Jedi hideout planet, was pretty, but meandering with a bizarre murder mystery side quests and endless monster killing, teasing out the last moments before the game finally hands you a lightsaber. Balls, bluer than a J. The Wookiee planet, I mean. The game told me to my face to bring Zalbar, so I didn't, obviously, and then warned me again. Then miraculously warped Zalbar into the major conflict, captured by the hostile chieftain because the game had to tell its story and wouldn't take no for an answer. It's just sloppy. You can force the player's hand, but justify it at least 0.1% better. And doesn't that kind of at least slightly devalue the push for player choice represented by the game's systems? At least kind of. Whatever, let's kill everyone in the room. Cool Regicide, bro, let's do it again. The desert planet wasn't horrible. I really appreciated the bright colors for once, and you know, sometimes KOTOR is peak comedy. Step outside the town, there's a spurned wife willing to exposit about her problems. We find her husband and have to dismantle the droids she set up to let him live. Oops, I made one mistake with the password. Surreal. Oh, and don't go force jumping into mines or, you know. Don't care for the fish planet. I guess it's cool in retrospect that you're expected to select good answers for a trial that determines if you get executed instantly or are permanently kicked off the planet or something, and the game scaffolds these skills earlier, but man does it drag. You know, at least the Dragon Age Landsmeet scene, predominantly a read and answer scene, tends to get heated, right? This is just a snore. And man, the Sith planet. I don't know what I was expecting. I didn't expect the Sith to be irredeemable. I guess I thought it'd be a simple, nah, they have a point, but they really, really don't. Everything about the Sith, as presented to the player, is self-aggrandizing cruelty, acquiring power and denying power to others, manipulation and backstabbing. Literally realpolitik, except wielded like a cudgel or a lightsaber. I can respect the writer's choice in not wanting to rehabilitate them, instead of pulling some fakey, cheap redemptive nonsense over what is, generally speaking and with my limited knowledge, an ideology of non-empathetic behavior. So entirely dismantling the Sith Academy, from top to bottom, was incredibly satisfying. oh, hey, this puzzle doesn't work. Switch version doesn't work. Let me throw up the source. Puzzle doesn't work. Thankfully not required for progression. Puzzle doesn't work. The game's writing doesn't really inspire or capture me at all. Maybe I'm getting more pretentious about this than necessary, but it puts you in that I'm being babied mindset pretty early. Crashing on a planet, surviving, joining the swoop races. Wow, you're like a natural. Joining the Jedi Order. You've leapt over the work of so many in such a short amount of time. You're a prodigy. It ass-pats you for hours. It's just a video game in those moments, totally removed from anything meaningful or grounded. The villains defy credulity. The thugs and criminals you meet are profoundly stupid. It's a cartoon snapshot of the cynical, browbeaten Star Wars universe. Then the game pulls the rug in one swift motion. Partway through KOTOR, we're revealed to be the powerful Darth Revan, apparently stricken with amnesia and ultimately rehabilitated in a plot by the Jedi Order. And that's a moment of crisis for the player. Is it ultimately an act of manipulation to rid someone of their libertarianism outright? Is that brainwashing? Shouldn't we be free to sell crack to children and drive our screaming metal death traps without a license?
What's next? Requiring a license to make toast in your own damn toaster?
It's a cool twist, but ultimately not that compelling. It's hard to present this as some horrible deed when we've been journeying with all of these people and helping civilians all game. It would be weirder to go the darker path, and I think that's why fans consider the light route canon. It's just a better story. There's a compelling drama in being redeemed from evil through questionable means, and choosing to do good anyway.
Alright, this one's for YouTube. Hey! I think he's broken! You see that? I think my friends are frozen, and none of the doors are opening, and yet my boy Malik is broken!
Now for KBash's trick, combining the dangling threads about Bastila, my interest in Star Wars, and the story of KOTOR 1. And the finale. Bastila gets a lot of shit unfairly for being standoffish, kinda like Yukari Takeba. But as hinted by your immediate grasp of the Force, the entire game is recontextualized with the reveal that you're playing as Darth Revan, the most powerful Darth who ever Revan. And ugliest too. Your destiny is allegedly tied up with Bastila's, in a very Star Wars epic space romance way, and that's fine. Brings two folks from different backgrounds together, and that makes for an interesting dynamic. Knowing nothing about the Force heading in, I came away extremely interested in the universe Lucas created and better understood why it got people excited. The light side of the Force in particular wasn't some vague good, it was more like intense discipline, controlled behavior, like white magic and a bit of blue in Magic the Gathering. White being predominantly about discipline, structure, adherence, that kind of thing. Contrasted directly by the dark side, which is flavored towards passion, ambition, emotion, somewhere between red and black magic, interestingly enough. It's cool, even if the strongest paragons of darkness in the game are the worst people alive. And to cast two characters as fated, from opposing sides of this dichotomy, one from the light, one from the side of control, and the other not. Of course Bastila is going to act the way she does to the player when she sees in him temptation and potentially destruction. And she knows her fate is tied to his. And she does warm up over the course of the game. Just like early reactions to Yukari for being sort of distant, hard to approach, like any normal woman not immediately interested in folding to the whims of the player, Bastila gets a bad rap, especially when you consider the later arc, with Bastila being converted to the dark side via Darth Malik. You're offered the chance to redeem her the exact way she was placed in charge of redeeming you. Oh, I fucked it up! Anyway, I got to the cutscene before the final boss, the game crashed, and I was forced back about 20 minutes and made to run through the BioWare CBT hallways, so I'd say KOTOR is a video game you can purchase. It appears I'm receiving a transmission on my phone.
Please play the Knights of the Old Republic MMORPG. KBash, you're our only hope.
Nah, if you think I should do the MMO, why don't you like, comment, subscribe, and share the video? Oh, f*** off.
Oh, shit. KBash wit undefeated, bro.
KOTOR 2 is pretty demented when you get right down to it. People hyped it at the expense of the original via Discord and Twitter so consistently, I thought, okay, this is gonna be amazing. And you know what? Fair enough, it's better than the original across the board. I'm struggling to think of an example where one shines brighter. Bro, I got an orange and purple lightsaber combo, and I'm looking fly as fuck. Let's Go! I think Obsidian, the studio BioWare handed their acquired Star Wars license over to for work on a sequel, got things basically right. People adore this title, and more power to them. It's punchy and memorable and interesting. It invites conversation. It rewards invested players. It's just cool. Unfortunately, most of the game is functionally identical, or at least very similar, so I've done most of the work already, and now we're just comparing systems. More notable is the writing, handled by Chris Avellone, a longtime games writer and penner of genuine classics. It's palpable the minute you're talking to NPCs for any length of time. Characters are more nuanced, conflicts are more sophisticated, at least compared to whatever was happening in the original. It feels more mature, even if some moments and scenes strain credulity. Whatever the case, it's an interesting take on an established IP, and that's the strength. A game that seizes the opportunity of existing in the medium of video games to find space for new stories. And glitches too, but I didn't say anything. I didn't tell. KOTOR 2 intros with a tutorial section. Unless you skip it, in which case KOTOR 2 opens with our chosen, created character protagonist running around with the sneaks. Until we help the most suspicious woman I've ever seen, and a twink.
Nice outfit.
Hey, shut the fuck up. You know what the writer has been accused of, man? Pipe down. The game pans out differently in pretty significant ways depending on your choice of protagonist, not just male or female options, though those do have direct consequences as well. But playing up the light or dark side of things can alter events radically, or rather, can alter what you're even allowed to see. The gist is, playing light side, not unlike the first game, is considered the canon route, the route you should ultimately take for the most complete picture of the game's events. And having played them now, I do get it. But that kind of sucks, honestly. For a game so thoroughly confident it can sell Krea's utilitarian jerk-offitude to the player, it really doesn't do much to reward exploring the center path, or even really the dark side, outside of mechanical benefits. Save force points on choking people to death, but we'll break it down more later. Eventually, we're suited up, squatted up, and let loose in the world like before. Rugrat-ass, playpen-ass game. Not unlike the first, our protag has a background. Unlike the first game, the protag isn't any particularly notable individual established by lore, not some unstoppable force, but a Jedi exile, one who joined the Mandalorian Wars against the Jedi Council's decree and was expelled from the Circle. Now, we don't know that for a good while, but it's implied pretty heavily, and I mean, you can't come off one thinking they wouldn't just slap a new spin on an old premise. It's a game. It's a sequel. Seed. Ever notice how JRPGs get made fun of for having amnesia?
I'll write the story. Let me guess. There's probably a young hero with some sort of memory problem.
But when the West does it, KOTOR 2 is more loved by fans for a lot of reasons, but one in particular is the meat of the journey. KOTOR 1 had long, samey, drawn-out planets, and if one wasn't vibing, from the Slog of the Sith Academy to the Fish Planet Trials, I mean, that's a whole planet in the bin. You can't have planets in the bin, that's a theme park! KOTOR 2 doesn't really suffer from overly frustrating levels. Sometimes they're a little long, but that's true of every BioWare RPG. Think the final CBT hallway of KOTOR 1, or the deep roads of Dragon Age. But see, this is Obsidian, and frankly, they didn't finish the game. I know 100 people are down in the comments or on Reddit asking, what the hell? Why didn't he play the restored content patch? And you know what? It's because I don't think it's gonna affect my view on the game. Maybe it'll even salvage it. I already think the play is good, and part of why I think it's good is the runtime. KOTOR 2 wastes significantly less time doing significantly more directed quest lines, minus a few, and it keeps the pace hot throughout. From my understanding, the restored content mod actually refuses to delineate between whether something was cut for a reason or whether something was cut due to time constraints. I'm just saying. I mean, look at Nar Shaddaa, one of the early levels you'll traipse through doing side quests, clubbing, typical KOTOR things. Whether because the game is unfinished or not, you can wander into conflicts with mercenaries totally voluntarily, and even kill a local crime lord without even understanding what he's done or who he is. Just walk in, pick a fight, and kill him. It's incredible. I'm sure someone's grinding their teeth over the impurity of that sort of play, but I think being afforded gameplay that accounts for plot ignorance and general disrespect, aka murder hoboism, is pretty choice. And it's not every mini-boss, to be clear, but that kind of emergent play is cool. Like if you're bored, you might stumble on who you need to kill without even worrying about it. Awesome. Now, that planet does play like a traditional KOTOR level. You're still going to recruit a party member and be dragged through a long story sequence, and still, KOTOR 2 is good at varying up the challenge to avoid the worst parts of BioWare RPG slog. Telos 4 starts as an investigation into a corporation which gets pretty hot. Like really hot. And then it transitions to a planet-side base crawl. Duxon stays as itself, the Mandalorian stronghold moon, rife with flora and fauna, and asks the player not only to go out into the jungle, but to prove themselves to the Mandalorians, renowned in-universe warriors, by helping them and beating them up. Dantooine, originally a fairly stale level, involves a dungeon crawl, cave exploration, and eventually the defense of a military base that you'll have to contribute to with various skill checks, setting up defense droids, using charisma to inspire the militia. It's infinitely more interesting and engaging for players at a baseline, incomplete game or not. Admittedly, some of the levels aren't great. Korriban was okay in the first, at least getting the opportunity to smoke 2 Sith leaders at once, and the whole academy was an ascended gameplay experience. In 2, it's reduced to an unfinished retread and some caves. And
hisses are enough to humble even an arrogant one such as you.
oh. Okay. Onderon also feels fairly unfinished. You'll basically roll into town and solve a murder mystery that requires one too many text boxes to be really enjoyable. And then a riot breaks out. See, that's cool. The level, despite all the quieter stuff, erupts with life after some time has passed, and you'll eventually go through a raid on a palace. Man, even when it feels unfinished, the pacing and variance sells the experience so well. Why is every Star Wars alien the ugliest thing I've ever seen? They didn't just nail it once. They didn't just nail it twice. They nailed it for just about every design. You know, people want to boink some of them Mass Effect aliens? Like Garrus? Star Wars. Have you ever thought that the world could be beautiful? Final note on regular play. I wish I could say combat felt any different. It feels better. I'm not sure how, but it does feel better. Or maybe that's just being allowed to customize my lightsaber with colors ranging from black to viridian, buffed by parts I crafted myself after scrapping tons of useless junk with the new crafting systems. Yeah, KOTOR gets nerdier and gives you plenty of personalization options while also rounding out certain skills that got less use in the first. Pretty nifty. You know, people underestimate the lightsaber. There's a Harry Potter or My Hero Academia shonen anime allure to fandom people looking at the lightsaber and thinking, what kind of lightsaber would I have? One thing KOTOR 1 actually does better than 2, I would argue, is feature darker environments that highlight the flash of the lightsaber. 2 has less visual contrast, which mildly takes away, but 2 also vastly increases what you can do physically with lightsabers. And as always with me, it comes back to swords. Hey, check out this clip where my under-equipped team of misfit idiots gets destroyed by the NPCs. And then I figure I can kite the enemies around the terrain and win. Sometimes people dunk on the game for being too easy. I say, thanks for the free lunch money, dweeb. Let's talk characters while we're on the play. Your party lineup changes slightly depending on choices you make. Some are baseline though. You've got the utility droid, an anti-droid Mandalore Gaming apparently, returning from the original with the new goal of restoring his people. Bao-dur, a guy who that one psychopath droid again. And frankly, none of these characters are very interesting. Mandalore is a cool legacy pick, at least. I never got the droid obsession, but that's Star Wars, and it's best to just nod and smile at all the crazy people. I'll also have to dedicate time to talking about the other universally available characters, Vyzis, Atton, and Kreia. Now, if you play a light side character, you'll end up with Mira, and if you play dark, you'll get Hanhar. This is entirely reversible before the endgame, so it's a question of if you'd rather have a dumb asshole or a tropey bounty hunter. Playing as a male nets you Brianna, a novice Jedi. Playing as a female gets you Makal, or the Disciple. Brianna and the player character learn from each other, so I can see her being liked by players. Makal's a boring person, but also a vast repository of lore dumps, so arguably makes the better party member for someone trying to learn more about the universe. If you ever wanted a YouTuber to dump their every hyperfixation on you in text, in your party, He can be your friend now. And yet, the entire game puts that lore on the back burner to sell the Exile's arc. You're often told things are this way or that way, and nobody can believe you're doing the things how you are. You're an anomaly, etc. But you've got player privilege, and you're allowed to choose, more often than not, if something is possible. It even compromises the personalities of the party members to the will of the player. So spoiler time. The premise driving most of the plot and the Exile's arc is that the Exile is likened to a wound in the Force, some kind of void where the Force's influence is either null or malleable. Maybe it's explained better elsewhere, but that's what I picked up. And somehow, this allows the Exile to influence the people around her, kind of vampirically, where the force surrounding other party members drains into that void. It's a real ephemeral idea that isn't visualized effectively, so I'm just gonna thumbs up and say, cool. What this means is playing the game a certain way will directly influence whether characters are light or dark aligned. You can pull a character from the depths of darkness if you want to. And further, you can eventually turn allies into Jedis, teaching them your ways. You become a near demigod in the Century, like a paragon unto yourself, able to affect meaningful change in the lives of those around you, and eventually the universe. That's significantly more powerful, more palpable than whatever KOTOR 1 was doing, and frankly, the team deserves props. I'd expect that kind of payoff out of an 80-hour JRPG, not this sane game for humans. And that conceit directly intersects with Atton, Vysis, and Kreia the most. Vysis is the hand of the box art villain, Darth Nihilus, someone fans really seem to love, but who only gets one major on-screen appearance, and a lot of telling otherwise, but whatever. Vysis starts dark aligned, but playing for the light, I pulled her all the way over and managed to make her even see herself as an individual instead of a tool for someone stronger. That's a great payoff, even if the character is kind of limp. I had a hand in their life. Awesome. Now, Atton Rand. The like Ayn Rand? This character falls in love with the female protagonist, and since you get him early, playing light side only feels like a satisfying rehabilitation for the rebuilding of the Jedi Order. He's a smarmy jerk-off, committed horrible crimes in the past, but for once, in a Star Wars game, you can melt the cynicism with your actions. I think it's an underrated talking point, but in the face of Mass Effect and other sci-fi IPs, Star Wars feels notably corrupt and hopeless. In a universe where the Force apparently guides people toward their destinies. It's rife for change, and the RPG context only amplifies it. I don't think it's some all-timer, life-changing arc, but amazing in context. And then there's Kreia. I hope it's telling that I'm actually devoting a few words to characterization. It's not that games writing is innately unsuited to quality, just that it faces severe challenges during development. It's not that games writing is all trite and meaningless. Far from it. It's just that the pedigree of writers and the collaboration with the team and other writers that often results from game dev can limit the potential of the writing. And many games simply try to capture novel writing without actually utilizing the very medium of games to tell stories in interesting and novel ways. I think KOTOR does good for games writing. Kreia is a character that could only have sprung from a video game, because her existence is predicated on a non-canon Star Wars premise, the wound in the Force problem presented by the Exile. Kreia has been praised for a long time, and mostly for being interesting, presenting a unique angle on the Force, taking issue with what she views as an ephemeral and therefore untouchable fate factory, enslaving people to its will, and therefore fundamentally opposed to her own values of freedom. I feel like I owe people an apology for getting rowdy about her early on Twitter, because she really is annoying, but that's the fun of the character. She exists so you can gain influence with her and be made aware of the system, treat her like a mentor, and eventually lose influence with her when you realize her worldview is totally myopic, and you, the Exile, actually have a meaningful fistful of power, and you can change the world around you. Early on, she scolds you for assisting someone who's being mugged, and she moralizes to you that, by helping him, he'll only become a target for somebody else. That man needs to rely on his own strength, and you only do him a disservice in aiding him. This is kind of brilliant, because she's so strikingly incorrect, so ridiculous in her apathy, and the only thing justifying her is a cartoonish cutscene showing the results of being kind. The player realizes, well, Either way, I'm gonna have to do something. This is an RPG. I can't just do nothing, stand for nothing, and will likely turn to the good side just to spite her for her outwardly nihilistic viewpoint, or at least become comfortable with losing influence with the character, which in a world where everyone optimizes their RPG playthroughs using guides, amazing design choice. In Krea's mind, every action causes an immediate reprisal, but you can prove her wrong because you're a wound in the Force. You have something nobody else does. And you can straight up make her look stupid by hauling your whole ass party to a better place, towards a better future. Anyone else would have proved Krea right, but you were just that good. Krea is fairly utilitarian, viewing altruism as meaningless weakness. It's rule by the strong or death. In retrospect, her Sith ties should have been obvious frame one, but she manages to both sides it just often enough to skirt suspicion for a while. And despite the story about collecting the scattered remnants of the Jedi Order, we're ultimately saved by Krea when they attempt to dispose of us, given that the protagonist can be a truly horrendous, destructive force for evil, and represents too much volatility for a Council of Jedi to ever allow. The twist makes sense, and even the ending is satisfying despite the weird, rushed conclusion. Krea's betrayal isn't that much of a surprise. If you're a good character, you represent something she could never soften to. Her misery is too entrenched in her soul, somehow, despite every other party member's susceptibility to your power. Entirely frozen over. You've saved worlds and helped others reach their potential. You are hope made manifest, and a corporeal argument for altruism, despite the beauty you represent to her. A being with the potential to break the sway of the Force and even master it. You have to be eliminated. Otherwise, Krea is wrong. Her beliefs meaningless. I went into KOTOR expecting basically nothing, and full disclosure, I don't see a ton of value in the original outside of going, oh yo, that's like Mass Effect, plus character arcs or the occasional bit of cool gameplay. It's a pretty video games experience, and more hours than your average player can probably justify. If you're really into Star Wars, it's a must-play, and it's not a question. To be charitable, even that first title makes you play ball with alien customs, makes you at least attempt to empathize with others. It's got good bones. KOTOR 2, though, I can recommend it to just about anyone. It's a recognizable IP, the potential for emergent experiences and unique playthroughs make it complex enough to warrant interest. It directly rewards time invested and bonds forged. You can quite literally make it to the finish line and not even realize you can train your friends into Jedi if you don't bother talking to them. I was told to play it twice through for the full picture, and frankly, I don't have the time, and most of the play will be similar. But there's enough to extract from multiple playthroughs. It's hard to look at the thing as weak. It's intentionally depthy. KOTOR 2 is flashy and fun enough, and because it's unfinished, hardly waste your time with overly designed, hyper-opulent scenarios. And what's better, the story is weird and subversive, and it will leave you forming opinions. It'll get you thinking about the IP. Thinking about Star Wars. That's quite a feat, especially for an outside author, adding onto a legacy. And more than that, I hope, it'll get people thinking about their own place in the universe. It's not uncommon for a JRPG like Xenoblade to lead you into thinking a specific way. Hope and life and goodness are worth striving for example. But I think there's something profound about an RPG that directly confronts a player's morality and asks them not to people please in-game, but to genuinely consider what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how to properly defend it. You are not often outwardly contradicted or finger-wagged by a JRPG. The player behind the screen is not often being directly inquired into, and I think that's the beauty of Knights of the Old Republic. Oh my god! For this video, extra special thanks goes to patron Bing Bing Doo Doo Oingo Boingo Time for purchasing both games, even though I ended up playing the Switch versions. I apologize. They wanted me to throw up this Morbius art they commissioned. Now you're cursed with it too. Hey, it's KBash. Huge thanks goes out to my $4 patrons. Check them out. Beautiful. And double special thanks goes to my extra generous patrons who are Adam Welch, Alpha 42, Snaps, Arch, Arshwasser, Azura, Axinate, Audra, Bear Skeleton, Basement Dweller, Bosch 7, Bearkeeper, BZ Soul, Ben M, Beguile, Bing Bing Doodoo Oingo Boingo Time, Blake Against the Machine, Wargle Hargle, Boha, Boom Dead, Brendan Hesse, Brios, Brianna Wu, British Gooch, Cal, Cakesar, Can I Cuss on Captain Here? Blasted, Captain Wade, C-Dub, Caesar T, Chiefy Boy, Hero Hero, Cordit, Chris Bromo, CLB 5000, Cody Golden, Comfy Moogle, Couch Moba, Crash Crater, Chrono 19D, CW Glassworks, Cynical, Daddy Dago, Dondium, Danny Lavelle, Danny Pangos, Dakota Storm Jones, Swag, David Castillo, Dara, Dakota, Dennis Amaya, The Strega, Diablo, Dingus Bat, Doug Prince, Dr. Cullen PhD, The Protagonist, Dylan Coffee, 8-Bit Elias, Elpio, Elsa, Emperor Pickle, Eric Monticello, Aesthetico, Everstone Isle, Gnar, Fupa Saiyan, Frankenstein, Frisky Nippler, Glitchseeker, 9cat, Goose 6112, the darkest black, Corey, Gucci Plant, Asi Ibrahim Tanyurga, Hatsune Miku's Crack House, Heeman, Game & Station, Hermit J, Hexmax, Honeymutt, Horn Tiger, how do you know? Huey, I'm supporting KBash just because I wanted to make this part of the video longer. Ingenious Clown, I punched a sandwich, Irrational, Irradiated Cherries, Dice Kyle, it's not bad, it's time to sue, it's not good, Ivy Ruth Langley, Jacob, James, Jason Lasky, Jaden, Jay JK Hedgehog, John Poe the Joker, Joke Frog, Jordan Joyner, Jules DLC, Julian My Julian, Kaizetta Slow, KBash's Best K, Keegan Too Cool, Kata Snap, King Kuma, Key, Tonight Pike, Clock, Kong 2020, Rated, Crazy Dark Chocolate, Kumi, Heist, Kyle, KZ Excellent, Lady Dentalian, Lady Weed, Latrix, Laundry Mom, Lego Sid, Lethal Nibbles, Little Big Trouble, Loathsome Dung Eater, Low Fat Moger, Lucas Boyd, Lucky McSmucky, Mac James, Lupin the Turd, Magic Meows, Magical Madman, Mama Rollin, Manapool, Mara Ganger, Mars Mugio, Maximilian Wolfgang Niver, Maple Puppet, Metal Gear Gash, Michelle Citrano, Mike DeVere, Milky Moo Official, Mikusagi, Moa, Bobby Dobby, Big Titty Gop, GF Cooley, Monochrome Only, Morgana Black, Modi, Mr. Dodongo, Mr. Whiskey 282, Mr. Yeety Dabface McYoinkbone, Nyranu, Nito Torpedo, Nico Puzzle Rat, Norian Daridius, Not Nobel, Nuggy, Old Burgle, Old Man Cranberry, Omni Nerd Zero, Only LK, The Plant, Pandemic Cowboy, Pinata, PBK, PK Gaming, Pontus Reddin, Popular Hitman, Potato Gaming HD, Prismatic Dan, Fractal and Pals, Project Darklight, Quasar McDougal, Quillworth, Quinn, Radpunk, Reasonable Willow, Reggie Rodriguez, Renteca Bond, Ricochet Frame, Relay, Roylondo, RP Gamer, Ryan Maury Brooks, Siren Smells Good, Salsa, Salty Smasher, Scribe Slendy, Say, Sakai no Award, Sexy Bionicle GF, Josh, Shinigami, Shintendo, Shut Up Wesley, Silver Bear 909, Singe, Sir Doodles a lot, Sim, God! Sleepy Wabbit, Slick Tactics, Snark, Sock'em Bopper, Suckdolager, Space Lizard, Spooky Grimalkin, Squidgid, Squishword, Standard Issue Dingus, Star Night Sky, Storm Strider and the House of Storm, Streetums, Sublime Cataclysm, Super Sandwich Guy, Harvold's Quest, Shorn Chubbington, Terrence Swift, The Big Bubby, The Clown Prince of Cringe, The Digital Dutchman, The Good Lord has blessed me, hallelujah! The Green Loki, The Legendary Zoltan, The Peacemaker Pyro, The Salt Knight, The Real McCoy, Big Dick Mystic, Thresh, Rips Heart, McGuffin, Tim Lobster, Timid the Writer, Turtle Play, Travis Edwards, Twiddle Chungus, Vid, Vacant Plaza, Valenrist, Venom, Vice Pop, Vic, Waposa, Weeb Trash, Waylon, Where Am I? Help? Widgie, Winter Solstice, Win TV, Brenchim, Zanny Tanner, Yashichi, Yay Kundo, Your Mom, Winky Face, Zachary Lives, Zachary Zanasso, Zane the Impure, Zane the Pure, Zed Slayer Gamer, Zero Zalazar, Sylvan Ray, Zenova, Cyberbug. If you'd like to help support the show, unlock new long-form projects, and help me keep improving, check out my Patreon. We got lots more videos in store. Stay tuned for more. KBash out.